We're going to be cold, but no snow yet.
Yeah, we're cold with snow, but it should clear out later on this week. But I'm just grateful because as I was thinking about what we were sharing, and we're going to talk about mental health, like just focusing on the childhood memories and more positive
Mhm.
childhood experiences can definitely help us. So, first question to you, my friend, is do you see people ignoring some of their childhood experiences and what are the consequences of that?
Oh, absolutely. Um, and we all do. And it's kind of just the way the brain works, the subconscious mind. Um, if you have someone that had trauma during childhood, it's actually very common for the brain to sort of partition that off. And there are people, myself included, I was just thinking about this today. I was talking with someone about when my mother died when I was 8 years old, and they were asking me about my memories of that. And I remember when my grandmother came in the room and sat down beside me and told me that my mom was not going to come back, that she wasn't coming home. I remember that moment. I don't remember anything else until a ride in a hearse. So somewhere in the frame of the funeral procession, I remember being in the back, with my head laid down in my grandmother's lap, and I that's about it. I don't remember the funeral. I don't remember a lot of that stuff because it was just so traumatic as a child. My brain just sort of blocked it out. And I have found that to be very, very common for people with childhood trauma abuse, where there might be blocks of years that they just don't remember. Um, yeah, it's more common than we think.
I agree. I agree. It's tough because in a lot of ways it's so traumatic that we just put it in the closet, close the door, we just ignore it. You know, the
Hmm.
dirty sock in the closet. We can smell
Hmm.
it. There's signs that it's there, but we're gonna ignore it. And then as you get into an adult, many times what happens is there's an event in your life that triggers you. And you're like, oh my God, where is that from? Do you see that happening as well to some people?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's even more difficult, I think, for people that are experiencing especially repetitive negative behaviors, thoughts, and consequences, but haven't yet put two and two together and said, okay, wait a minute, this is because of um, childhood trauma. For instance, relationships, I think, are probably the most common. You see people, I'm sure you've heard of attachment theory. Most people at least have heard of it and kind of understand a little bit. You tend to have anxious attachment and then you have avoidant attachment, sort of two ends of the spectrum in that sense. And the both of those are tied right directly from childhood behavior or treatment, rather, how your caregiver or your mother did or didn't make a healthy attachment to you, an attachment bond. So you grow up and you're in these relationships and you're having certain reactions and you're also picking partners subconsciously that have the opposite reactions. And you're like, well, why is this happening to me? This isn't the first time. And sometimes people don't know. They don't realize, well, wait a minute. This kind of goes back to the way I was raised, when I was little. And to change that pattern, you kind of you have to do some work. You have to go in and do some acknowledgement, some discovery, what we call shadow work. People have heard of shadow work, going in and working with the inner child and learning what you needed that you didn't get and how to give that to yourself and accept that for yourself. So then you can start healing, some of those responses. So yeah, it's very common in people with childhood trauma and abuse that they are experiencing things in life as adults that are directly tied to it, and not just mental health, but physical health as well.
I look at it like the four pillars of health, where you have the spiritual, the emotional, the mental, and the physical.
Yes.
Physical, I think everyone knows, right? I go to the gym, I lift weights, I look like Arnold. Right?
That's
For lack
that's
of a
the
better.
that's the plan, right?
Yeah, that's the plan, right?
Yeah.
And then spiritual, I think many people have some type of religious or spiritual background. It could be their
Hmm.
grandparents or whomever, right?
Right.
Emotional. I think that's probably one where so many people miss
Hmm.
because we're not trained and we're not taught. There's that joke, right? Like men could only experience anger and women can experience every emotion but anger.
Right.
Right? There's that disconnect. And you shared something like when it comes to attachment styles. What do you then think are maybe some of the obstacles that people face when it comes to identifying maybe their attachment styles and how it impacts their relationships in adulthood?
Oh, that's a good question. Right off the bat, I think of personality. So we all typically believe we just have a certain personality, like I'm me and you're you, and that's just the way you are because you're you. But sometimes if we can take a step back and look at patterns and say, oh, wait a minute, I'm doing this, 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 and this regularly, or I've done it, throughout these many years. I also respond in this same way to certain things. It's not just your personality. It could very well be tied to something else, be it trauma, be it attachment. Um, and you, one of my core beliefs and core teachings is to become a student of yourself. If you want to improve your life, your health, your mental health, your physical health, your social health, your financial health, all these areas, become a student of yourself. Learn to take a step back as if a third person and look at these things, look at these patterns honestly. And, don't make excuses. And same time, don't make judgment either. Just observe. If you can begin doing that, you'll start seeing those things. And then you can kind of chase them. Then you can say, okay, so I see that if I'm in a relationship and the person doesn't text me back within a couple of minutes, I immediately start worrying. My body starts tingling or feeling warmer or tensing up. I'm having anxiety just because this person didn't respond in a couple of minutes, and it's not just one time. This happens often. Okay, well, that's not normal. That's not healthy, at least. That's not balanced, we could say. So you can just take that right there, and then you can say, okay, well, why? Why am I getting this type of response, from that? And then that's when you can go into that attachment theory and say, okay, if someone is having this issue, okay, well, that's an anxious attachment style. Oh, what's that from? Oh, that's from being a child. You didn't get the love that you needed, that you were either left alone or afraid of being left alone or being abandoned, or your voice wasn't heard, your priorities, your needs and wants weren't heard. So you have this desire inside you to go close, to draw close to someone very quickly, very strongly. You know, you might hear people say, "Oh, well, you're smothering," and that's what that is. And then when they don't respond with what you want and need, you panic. And so that's when you can say, "Okay, all right, what do I need to do about this now?"
I wonder how difficult that would be for someone because one, you're going to have to do the work to understand the type of person you are.
Mhm.
right? And I think that there's so many distractions in the world today. There's social
Mhm.
media, there's work,
Mhm.
there's a certain lifestyle you want to achieve. But then to take a step back and say, Train, Jamie, I want to be a better person. I want to understand why my body is reacting this way,
Mhm.
but that means I'm going to have to find the time to do so.
Yes. Yes.
Is that a big obstacle for people to find the time to work on themselves?
It is, but I'll go back to a saying that if you want to, you will. If you want something bad enough, you'll find the time to do it. If if you went to the doctor tomorrow and he said, "Look, your arteries are clogged as hell. You're like a month or two away from having serious cardiovascular issues, possibly a heart attack, possibly something. You need to start exercising today, you know, not running 50 miles a day, not spending 6 hours in the gym, but let's say walking 30 minutes a day. You need to do that, and it needs to be at least 3 times a week. And this will start healing that." You would probably be like, okay, sure, I'll do that. I'm going to find 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week to do that if I'm in serious danger. Um, so you kind of have to look at it like, do I want this bad enough? Have I hurt enough in relationships? Have I hurt other people enough in relationships? And I don't want to live the rest of my life that way. You adopt a long term viewpoint, a long term understanding. And this is an issue. And I think you kind of touched on this in terms of our culture and our society. We're so, I've got a ache, I've got a symptom, so let me take a pill, and it better be better in 30 minutes or less. Well, I've got this issue and it needs to be fixed now. I expect a response now. Um, and that's not the way nature works. And we're part of nature. Even though we live in technology, we're biological organisms. We're part of nature, and nature works long term. So you absolutely have to adopt that mindset. And this is kind of where, having a good therapist or a good coach will come in handy if that's something that's available to you. If you can take advantage of that type of resource, absolutely do it, because then you got someone that has some experience and understanding of not just where you're at, but where you're going, and can kind of encourage you, can kind of hold you accountable. But if you can take that long-term approach and say, I'm going to make little changes that are over time going to have big results, that's when you can start doing it. And you can do it with a coach or a therapist. Like I said, there's a lot of self-help books. There's a couple of like really good ones I've seen for attachment styles, avoidant and anxious, that really uh, will will lay out what the problem is, where it comes from, and how to make improvements. Um, but it's just like anything else, even the physical health we mentioned. If you're going to make improvements, you need to do a little bit repetitively over a long time, and you'll see the benefits.
It seems such a difficult road for so many people. And you raise a really good point where if you were to go to the doctor and they said that you were damaged in some way, broken arm, broken finger, you would take it very seriously. And I wonder then sometimes because they can see the damage, they can see maybe what it looks like from a pain perspective.
Mhm.
If I'm someone that is emotionally bankrupt,
Mhm.
I may not have a reminder of that on a daily basis in comparison to a broken arm where I have a reminder of it on a daily basis, right? Like every time I put on my shirt, I'm like, oh my God, this hurts, Jamie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just give
Yeah.
me something, right? And then from an emotional standpoint, sorry, from a avoidance standpoint, I could avoid go to work, work 14 hours, and the person that I'm hurting, hopefully they're in bed. And then the cycle continues.
Hmm.
For those who are on the other side, who are in a relationship with someone like that, what maybe are some ways or maybe some advice that we can give to them to help themselves? Because at the end of the day, you really can't help those that don't want to be helped.
Absolutely. Yep. You can't change someone else as much as you want to. Uh, and I'm one of those people. This is going to be preaching to the choir here. I am super empathetic. I'm super hopeful when it comes. I see possibilities in people. So I've been in the relationships where I've ignored the red flags and I've said, well, but this person has A, B, and C really, really great qualities. And if I love them enough, if I'm patient enough, I can help them. I can bring out those good qualities and reduce the bad qualities. And those people, if they, like you said, if they don't want to change, they're not going to. They're just not, you know? It's the same with, you know, what we've heard with addicts, an alcoholic or a drug addict, someone with a substance use disorder. If they don't want to get help, they're not going to. It doesn't matter what you do. You can put them in jail for 3, 6 months. When they come out, they're dry as a bone. But guess what they're going to be doing in the next 3 weeks? Almost guarantee it's almost like clockwork. Before they hit 30 days, they're back on it. So when it comes to relationships, first of all, you work on yourself. You know, okay, what do I need to do so that I have more peace in my life and inside? Understand that um, you can work on what's internal. You can't always fix what's external. Talk with someone if you can about where your hard lines are going to be. If you're already in the relationship, obviously you're there because you care about the person. You want to be there. You want to have a good relationship, but you there has to be a point where you we're willing to walk away. And it's not going to be good. It's not going to be what you want, but it might be what needs to happen, and you need to identify that point. Then you can just talk with the person that you're in the relationship with and say, hey, you know, can I share with you some things that I'm thinking and feeling? And make it, instead of accusatory, instead of saying, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing this, you're doing that, make it, hey, this is how I feel. So when I want to share good news with you and I'm trying to communicate that, and uh, I'm not getting the time and attention, that I feel that I need, it really hurts my feelings. It really makes me feel alone in this relationship. Um, you know, when I do a lot of extra work, around the house or with the car or, romantically or sexually or emotionally, and I just am not seeing the reciprocation, I really feel unwanted. Um, or on the other side, on the avoidance side, if, look, when I say that I just need some time to myself, I just need a couple of hours by myself to kind of process life and process my own thoughts and emotions. Um, and if I don't get that time, I feel smothered. I feel like I'm losing my independence, and like I get afraid and I want to run. And so you got to be honest, and then communicate it in the right way to where it's not accusatory. And again, if the person wants to work on it, then that gives you a talking point. And if they are like, oh, okay, it's not my intentions. I didn't mean to make you feel that way, or I didn't realize I was doing that. I'm sorry, something. If you get some kind of accepting response, then is when you can say, and again, we'll take this back to improvements in physical health or emotional health. The same with relational health. One step at a time. So don't just go and blurt out, hey, here's 12 things I want to see improved in the next month. No, just start with one. Say, okay, well, something that would I would really enjoy is, when we first started dating, we would go out at least once a week. We would go out to dinner. Can we do that again? Or, something I really enjoy is when we just cuddle up and watch a movie. Maybe after we're tired from the day, maybe it's just time to be together. Can we plan on that at, like on the weekends or something to try to do that? You know, find one thing to help. And that's kind of that progression of how you begin to heal in that relationship. So start with yourself. Don't accuse, but honestly share your feelings and how you feel, not how it's the other person's fault. And then make a suggestion for an improvement, but be willing to put in your part and to listen to the other part. Is there something that you would like? Is there something that you would like to see different, either that I can do or that we can do together? You mentioned you feel smothered if you say you need some time, and I I don't always hear you say, quote, I need some time. I just see you get frustrated and walk into another room. I don't know what's going on. So how can we communicate that? And I will be more than happy to say, okay, great. You go do you and for a while, and I'm going to go do something else. And in 2 hours, I'm going to check on you and just see if you're doing okay. It's that good. So, you're not only expressing your own feelings and needs, but you have to listen as well. And hopefully, the two of you can agree to work on that and take it a little step at a time.
I learned the value of listening and speaking probably I want to say 10 years ago, 15 years ago in my 20s. And the reason I learned it is I was having unsuccessful friendships and relationships.
Mm,
And you made an example of addiction. I had to hit rock bottom in order to come back up because I would look around and it wasn't making sense because I would ask myself, Terrain, you want to achieve X,
hmm
but why are all these people not contributing to that success? And then when I learned that lesson, I began to realize what was broken inside of me
hmm
was what I was searching for in others to help them fix,
Absolutely. And
right?
that's true about all of us. We
Do
do.
you see how important is it for people to understand that point where they're sometimes you're searching for what's broken inside of you in others so you can fix it in them.
Oh, yeah, extremely important. And if you think about it, it makes sense. We're relational beings. We desire connection. Even if we're talking about substance abuse, 9 times out of 10, it's not the substance. It's not the substance that's the problem. It's that there's something else broken, some other connection that's broken or missing than maybe a void and that person's trying to fill. They're trying to numb. There's an emotional issue there. So when it comes to our relationships, we kind of just naturally want the same type of love that we're giving, and we kind of expect that from the other person. And we also want that to fix, like you said, what's inside us that's missing, that's broken, that's off balance. Um, and it's funny because the most of the time we don't realize that we don't think about it in these terms. For one, we're not taught to. E- Even in a good family, even in a good, stable family, you get more out of watching as a child growing up than you do out of hearing. There's not a lot of teaching. I used to have a pastor years and years and years ago, and he used to say this, and it annoyed me to no end. And now looking back, I understand why he was saying it. He says, he said, more is caught than is taught. And what you show your children, the example you show them, that's how they learn to behave, how to think about themselves, how to treat others, more so than you telling. So you can, so for instance, when I was growing up, my dad smoked and my stepmom smoked, and they would say, don't smoke. Okay. How much sense did that make? You're both sitting there puffing away and saying, don't smoke because it's bad for you. You know, that don't make any sense. Um, so you can say anything you want, but children are going to learn from observation more and the environment. So we just, we don't even have a good understanding. Even in psychology, we still, every, 20 or 30 or 40 years, there's like this shift in understanding of how the mind works, how the body works. Um, you can go back as far as you want. Psychology as a science, sort of had its official beginnings in the 1800s. And, Freud, of course, being one of the most famous, and, Freudian psychology. And um, he was like, well, everything's some kind of sexual connection. And he had the precept that a child's bond, a child's attachment to either their mother or father was sort of like this pre-sexual nature. And, we've learned since then that, well, wait a minute, he was sort of correct in that a child does have an emotional bond and an attachment to that parent that is natural and that is necessary, not just good, but necessary. But it doesn't have anything to do with, it's not a pre-sexual type thing. Um, and of course, then we lead into the attachment theory. So we don't have a really good understanding of how we work and even what we need. And I think it's so important to read as much as you can, listen as much as you can. The more you can absorb and the more you can observe in yourself and your own life, the more it starts to make sense and the more changes you can make for the better.
It's like that one child that experienced conditional love, and they always had to perform for their parents because up until a certain age, depending on the child, you need your parents for what? Safety and security. You
Hmm.
can't provide it for yourself. And then as you're an adult, what do you do in your adulthood? You go out there and you perform for other adults who's going to give you safety and security. And I see, unfortunately, probably more women struggling with that because they would go and find these toxic and abusive relationships from men
Hmm.
who give them the illusion of safety and security and they will perform in their own way. And then you have on the men's side, if they've grown up with a conditional love and they've always had to be an A plus student, they have to be MVP on the sports team, they're gonna go there, get the best jobs, and then expect people to give them certain type of praise. And when they don't get it, they can lash out.
Hmm.
Um, for those who struggle to understand how much of an impact their adult behaviors come from their childhood experiences? How can we help them to understand their triggers?
Mm, yes. Something that is amazing, and this, if you've never heard this before, it's going to blow your mind. And I think this might open some eyes. You have your conscious mind, you have your subconscious mind. We think that we're making decisions and we're responding from our conscious mind. Okay, here's a situation, here's a person, here's my response. I think that that's coming from my conscious mind, my intellect, my reasoning, my whatever, even if it's the awareness of my emotions. That's what I think. It is not. We, nobody, nobody, no human being understands or knows themselves or the world around them fully. Your subconscious mind processes information. So just like your computer, the program, as we're talking on this interview, we're doing it virtually. Well, the computer is running these programs, this code behind the scenes that allows us to do that. Everything from the video to the audio to the recording to the internet, it's all code being run in the background. We only see the results. That's how the brain works. So your subconscious mind processes, and this is a conservative number, very conservative. We think the subconscious mind processes about 11 million bits of information per second. 11 million per second. So if you would like to get a gold star for today, tell me your guess, your best guess at how many pieces of information you think the conscious mind processes per second. What's your best guess?
My best guess, in an effort not to embarrass myself, I'm going to say I don't know.
No, you gotta guess. You gotta guess.
I will, yeah, I will say probably a million.
Okay, that would be a good guess. Your subconscious processes 11 million bits of information per second. Your conscious mind processes 10 bits of information per second.
And an idea was going to be less. I didn't think it was going to be that much less.
Yeah,
That's significantly less.
exactly. All of our responses and behaviors are running on autopilot. And if they're running on autopilot, they have to have something that's telling them what to do, that code that's running in the background, which comes from everything our nervous system, our brain, our body has experienced since conception. All of that is cumulative. So it just makes sense that when you think about that, wow, 11 million pieces per second is really dictating my behavior and my responses and my feelings versus 10 that I think, um, it just makes sense and it's very easy to understand. Okay, my responses in relationships then are due to what's running on autopilot. It's the code that's running in the background. It's not just what I'm thinking in this moment. So there's a great opportunity then to dive in and examine that and understand it more.
How can someone then tap into that to understand themselves better? Because that's a lot of information that is beneath the surface.
Sure. Just realizing that it comes from your past experiences and just go back and keep going back and know that your nervous system even though we still have neuroplasticity as an adult, it's extremely slow compared to as a child. So when you're a child growing up, from the time you're born up until almost 24 years of age, those neurons in the mind and those neural pathways, they're growing and they're developing at a astronomical rate. So you just need to go back and look and say, okay, well, here's what happened, here's what didn't happen, you know, and be honest about it. And that way you can learn. You can start to learn, say, okay, all right, yep, I see this, and, you know, maybe this was healthy, but maybe this wasn't, you know, or maybe I keep catching myself thinking only about the unhealthy stuff. Well, that should be a sign, because you should have a mixture uh, of both. And so, yeah, it's just a matter of going back and being observant and starting to put those two pieces together.
So let's take someone like me, but superimpose on someone else. I grew up without my mother and my father. I felt abandoned as a child. That's in my code,
Hmm. Yes.
right? And
Yep.
everything and every trauma experience and behaviors that comes along with that.
Hmm.
I enter ripe age of 20.
Hmm.
I think I'm catnip, right? I'm going out there. I think I'm the sexiest thing in the world. I think I'm the most accomplished thing in the world.
Uh-huh.
Now, my friendships and my romantic relationships, they continue to end and they end and they end.
Uh-huh.
But they end not necessarily because maybe the person is a bad person, is because I'm self-sabotaging it and am abandoning it because it's something from my past.
Right.
Or is that one of the ways that past experiences can show up where what was done to you, you are now going out and doing it to others?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that kind of goes back to the attachment theory. So if the anxious attachment style draws closer because they fear being abandoned, the avoidant pushes away because they fear being abandoned. So they're basically, I'm going to do it to you first before you can do it to me. Because deep down, I feel that I am unwanted and that I'm not good enough and that maybe I'm a bad person because when I was a child, I was treated a certain way. And so they grow up with that concept of if things are good as long as it's in the honeymoon stage, but as soon as vulnerability is expected, whoa, 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 whoa. This their nervous system literally burns. It catches on fire and says, it pulls the fire alarm and says, get out, get out, get out. Whereas the anxious, when their fire alarm goes off, it says, go in, go in, go in. So that avoidance sometimes comes out in that way that you described that, yeah, I'm going to get out of this, whether it be romantic relationships or friendships. I'm going to back out because I'm eventually going to get hurt anyways, or, you know, real love just doesn't exist. So after the fun, I'm out. You know, there's no taking the time to sit still and say, okay, look, I need to be vulnerable and I need to be emotionally available, and that's going to take some work.
Could then that mean that those who are struggling with this will reject healthier relationships because maybe they don't feel worthy of them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When it comes to, and again, this goes for both sides. So we're playing this, tennis match between avoidant and anxious. It just plays out in a different manner, but both are sort of like, well, the anxious doesn't understand what a healthy boundary is, and the avoidant doesn't understand what healthy vulnerability is. So it's either too much or not enough. And so it absolutely comes out in those ways. And when a person's in a relationship and all of a sudden it's healthy, the other person is, you know, making good effort, making healthy effort. And again, we're, for the naysayers out there that might be like, well, no relationship's perfect. Well, of course not. But one of the best and key signs of a healthy relationship is how you handle conflict. That, if you can learn to handle conflict, that's going to keep your relationship going for a long time, and it's going to provide you with the most satisfaction, the most security, the most understanding. Um, but if you can't handle conflict in a healthy way, that right there should tell you this is not a healthy relationship. And so if the partner you're with comes to you and says, "Hey, look, when you did such and such, it really hurt my feelings. It really bothered me. You know, what was your intent with that? That was it, did you really mean it that way or whatever?" And you automatically start backpedaling. You're avoiding conflict. That's there, there's a term for that. It's conflict avoidant. We've all probably all heard that. And that's very, very much a part of the avoidant attachment style. They're very conflict avoidant. They don't want to get into conflict. So they're more unlikely to work on the things that are needed to build a healthy relationship. And so when those things show up that are good and healthy, they start backpedaling.
I'm glad you mentioned that, the conflict resolution part, because I shared that with someone that you will learn the most from your relationship through the conflicts you resolve.
Yeah.
And this person struggled with it because her first step was to avoid or
Hmm.
to run.
Hmm.
So there's a situation where she literally moved countries.
Yeah.
Right? That's how much I've
Serious
avoided.
running. Yeah.
She was, right? But what so many people forget is that you could run away from the problem, but you can't always run away from the source of the problem, right?
Yes.
Which is
Yes.
many times is the person. Do you still see do you think some people still believe that if they continue to run, they will eventually outrun their issues?
Dude, if I had if I had some kind of t-shirt or hat or something that said Forrest Gump on it, we could give those things out all day, every day, and never stop from people that think you can outrun problems. And this is for male or female both. I know people we give each of us give the other one a bad rap, but this is true across the board. If you keep having relationships and it's always the other person's fault, and they're always the jerk, and they're always the this and the that, no, it's not. It's not. There's something in you that needs to be addressed. It's like driving your car and one of the tires is flat and you keep going. You're like, why in the world is this car shaking like this? I don't understand it. Every time I go over a bump, it just makes this noise. This just doesn't make sense. Well, it's because there's a problem. And until you fix it, you're going to keep having those problems. You can run away all you want, but the problem's within you. You're going to take it with you, no matter where you go, no matter who you end up with. And if you do happen to end up with someone that is just totally submissive to whatever your issues are, you're not going to be happy with that. Nobody's happy with that. You know, even narcissists, clinical narcissists, they want someone that they can take their stuff out on. But guess what? When they start doing it, they're unhappy. They're miserable, you know? And this is a person who is intentionally doing it. It's part of their lifestyle, but they're unhappy. So yeah, you can't Forrest Gump your way out of relationship problems, and it is not easy. So, we often hear, even myself, just talking about these issues, and we hear other people online and psychologists and relationship experts, and they're like, oh, just do this, and oh, just do that. Well, okay, well, they're giving you good advice, they're giving you good things to do, but it's not easy. It's not easy to face the demons inside you. It's not easy to face the darkness and say, look, some of this stuff is me. Some of this stuff is coming from me. Now, I may not be the one that put it there, you know, it may come from childhood trauma, like we've been talking about, but it's in me. And until I can deal with that, it's going to be very, very, very difficult and unsatisfying to have a healthy relationship
Why do you think some people don't want to heal that part of their life?
because it's hard. You have to do the work. You have to face the things that you just don't want to. You just want to push them to the side and not deal with them. Um, it's why you only see 0.00001% of the world's population that climb the highest mountains because it's hard. It's why you have 400,000 high school football teams with 20 to 40 players, and then you only have 40,000 college teams with 20 to 40 players, and then you only have 40 or 50 pro teams with 20 to 40 players. It's hard. And if you don't put in the work, you're not going to get the results. And I am telling you from my personal experience, I grew up, like I told earlier about my mom dying when I was a child. I went directly from that into an abusive home with my father. And I grew up that way. I grew up with undiagnosed and untreated depression. I grew up with suicide attempts. So when I tell you I understand, I understand. It's not fair and it sucks when you're an adult and you have to say, okay, look, I have to deal with this now. It's not fair. It should be easy. It should just be, I love you and you love me, and that's it. And that's enough to make it work. But it's not. So we have to face those demons and just say, yep, this is not fair and this is going to hurt some. And I'm going to have to deal with the pain. I'm going to have to revisit my past that already hurt me. I'm going to have to cry. I'm going to have to get mad. But if I want to make it to the other side, if I want to climb this mountain, then that's what has to be done.
For those like you and I, Jamie, and our generation who have gone through the trauma, what do you think is our role in assisting the next generation to maybe prevent the trauma from repeating?
Mm. Ooh, that's a good question. I like that. One thing like we're doing right now, just openly talking about the issues and letting people know that, hey, look, this kind of stuff is normal. You're not alone in this. It's not like it's not just you, you know, it's not just you that's had 5 or 6, bad relationships in the past year or 2 years. Um, we've been there. There's a lot of us that have been there and done that. But it's also time to be encouraging and say, if you do this stuff that we're talking about, that's not easy. You first of all, you reap the rewards of yourself. You learn to love yourself and you learn what peace is in your life. Um, you learn that everything that smells like a rose is not a rose. You learn that you go out on a date with someone or you start talking to someone or seeing someone that everything's all fine and good at the beginning. That's what everybody does. But that doesn't make for a good relationship, and that doesn't mean that that's what's going to sustain, and that feeling of love, that doesn't equal the giving of love for a long time. The feeling of love comes and goes, and that's normal in a relationship. So having these conversations and helping people to see, okay, yeah, all right, yeah, this is what I've experienced, this is what I'm seeing, and maybe I've seen in my home growing up, or I've seen myself so far, and I hear you. This, this kind of stuff is normal, and I can work on it. I can do this, and I can build a better future for myself and my kids.
What distractions then do you think are maybe preventing people from hearing the voices of their trauma and then continue to ignore it?
Mm, mm. Well, I think the kind of like I mentioned, the fairy tale view of love and relationships. And we think that just because we have feelings for someone, just because we might fall in love, that moment, that feeling is supposed to be what we get every day in a relationship. And that's just not true. It's just not true. Think of that in terms of seasons. You have four seasons, right? Spring, summer, fall, and winter. Well, that feeling, that type of love is spring. And you will have that. It will come, but it will also go. And then you'll go into another season, and the other season being summer and then fall. And you're going to experience winter as well, even in your relationship. And that doesn't mean it's an unhealthy relationship, like we said earlier, because there's conflict. There's conflict in every relationship. I have two kids. I love my two kids to death. I would, like, cut my left arm off in a sense to give to my kids to make sure they're okay. But boy, man, there's been times when they were growing up, and there's times now when I'm like, dude, you know, we about to throw hands. You know, there's conflict there. I don't agree with them. They don't agree with me on everything. It's just the way it is. But I still love them to death. And my son, like, he'll call me, 3 or 4 times a week and just chit chat for no reason. But we might talk about something we're disagreeing. That's normal in a relationship. So we have to get rid of that fairy tale. And that's something that definitely distracts people. And I think the other side of that coin is the abusive side. So we've got this fairy tale side of the coin, and the other side is the abusive side. Maybe you grew up in a household where there was domestic violence, where there was sexual assault, where there was neglect, being not having food to eat, not having a mother and father that communicated or even gave you the love and time you need. So there's that other side of the coin. And we may think sometimes that, oh, that's just normal. That's just the way life is. You know, it's just supposed to be that way. So when a girl gets in a relationship with a guy and he's real sweet and everything at first, but then a few months into it, there starts to be a little name calling. There starts to be a little cussing out. There starts to be maybe a little pushing. Well, that's just normal. You know, that's the way that people are treated in a relationship. And that becomes almost a blinder that people don't see that no, this is not normal. This is not healthy. And it should not be this way. And you need to move in a different direction. So I think it's that coin. It's either the fantasy. which is unrealistic, or the violence and abuse, which is unrealistic. And it's that healthy balance that we need to gravitate towards.
With that said, Jimmy, I want to ask you one final question. I'm going to give you three wishes to do so since you mentioned the balance between fantasy
Okay.
and reality, of course, right?
All right.
What are three things you wish people knew about creating boundaries to protect themselves from living in the fantasy more so than reality?
Okay. Hmm. Three boundaries to protect against living in the fantasy. Oh, this is a tough one. I needed prep time for this one. I need research time for this one. Um, I would say one is communication. Communication is one of the best tools, one of the best skills, which will also act as a healthy boundary. Learn to communicate because you will get more realism that way. Your husband, your wife, your partner, whoever comes home and they're grumpy and you think it's about you. If there's no communication there, you're not going to find out. They're really just mad because something happened at work, or maybe they got a speeding ticket on the way home, or maybe, there's a family issue with their mom or dad or cousin, or, there's got to be communication. Number two, self-care. Self-care. And this goes mentally and physically. Never, ever, ever believe the premise that we see and hear that mental health is different than physical health. The best two things you can do for your mental health are exercise and diet. So that's a whole nother rabbit, that we could chase in terms of that, but self-care. So communication, self-care. And the third I would say is, um, I would just say is